Good morning, everybody. Welcome to FAFSA Ready training. This training is going to be all about special circumstances. This is where students have certain considerations, life events that happen in between the year they file taxes, or there's other things that happen that they need special considerations for. So we're going to talk about that today. This training will be recorded, or is being recorded. It will be available on the FAFSA Ready training page. If you haven't seen that already, head to HESC.ny.gov, hit that high school counselors tab, and then you'll see FAFSA Ready training program. There you'll find 3 modules with seminars, videos, FAQs, resources, a whole bunch of stuff for you and for students to help them through the financial aid process. You'll find the seminar there and others. And then you'll also find the PowerPoint for this seminar there after we go through some, audio things. Will be up by Monday or probably Tuesday and Wednesday since Monday's a holiday. There is no microphones because of that, because we're recording. So we ask that any questions that you have, you put in the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel can be opened either by that Q&A button right by the share icon, right by that green share icon. There's a Q&A button next to chat. If you open that up, it'll open a panel that will show you where you can type in some questions. You can also, if that's not available there, you hit the more button. When you hit that more button, that Q&A, there should be a line for Q&A. You open that up, and that's where I'll keep all the questions. It's really important that you guys do that because as you guys ask questions, we're able to really bolster that FAQ section of each module and add as much questions and answers that people may be asking. Because if you have that question, I can always guarantee other people have that question as well, and we'll add it to our site. Last thing before we get started, there is a survey at the end of the training that will automatically generate once you close out of this meeting. We really covered your feedback. I really covered your feedback of some of that created this program, this training, some of these resources. We really want to make sure that we have created things and programs that really truly help counselors, really truly help people that are helping students. So if we're missing something, if the seminar is missing something, or if we're doing a good job, we really want to know that we're either hitting the mark or missing the mark. And if we're missing the mark, we want to make those corrections. So please let me know and we'll get that going. All right. So as we continue, we're going to go right into the agenda. Okay, the agenda for today. We're going to first discuss the differences between federal special cases and New York State special circumstances. Okay, then we are going to explain what special cases are, discuss New York State TAP income adjustments, and then New York State TAP financial independence. And then after we get through that, I'll let the mics loose and open a Q&A panel, and we'll have some discussion and some questions after that. So the presentations took about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll have some time for Q&As after that. So let's talk about first the differences between federal special cases and New York State special circumstances. Please forgive me if I'm change the terminology. I always use them interchangeably, but for federal government, it's called special cases. And then for New York State, it's called special circumstances. You'll see those terms kind of used interchangeably during this presentation. So for FAFSA and for TAP, both have allowances for adjustments or dependency overrides for independence and family income. So they both allow for special circumstances for things that happen, okay? FAFSA and TAP have different rules, and a lot of today is going to be spent on looking at the rules for those allowances. These allowances are based on law, so it's not like TAP or FAFSA say, "Nah, well, never mind. We just don't want to do that." This is based on ed law, so that is what our restrictions or where our circumstances and adjustments come from. It's all from ed law. No matter what the circumstance is, there's going to be documentation that's going to be required to verify for both TAP and FAFSA. So there are going to be some differences as to what's allowed at different levels. So for FAFSA at the school level, they may allow other documentation and types of or ways to document information, and TAP may have a few less options, but they have their way of getting their documentation. And then students who receive overrides or adjustments for FAFSA may not have that same adjustment for TAP. I've had students that have emailed or called and said, listen, my school said I can get this. Why can't I get it on TAP? And it's really because of the ed law. So I put that in there to make sure as you're working with students to help them understand Just because you have a special condition or circumstance for FAFSA does not always mean you're going to get that same consideration for TAP. It's all based on ed law, and we try our best to navigate those situations as best we can. So let's go into FAFSA special cases. Right, we'll start with FAFSA first, and then we'll go to TAP. So FAFSA special cases. Watch out. Is it back? All right. FAFSA special cases. Um, this is where either the students go and ask the financial aid office to make exceptions, or based on the answers to their FAFSA, the school's made aware of special cases or circumstances that the student may be facing. So these can be unusual circumstances, which usually revolves around independence, or special circumstances that revolve around income. Right. That's why I always get these terms confused, because we call them special circumstances also at the state. So students can have both an unusual circumstance and a special circumstance. Something to be aware of: each school is independent in their determination. So if a student is going to SUNY Oswego as of now, and they've sent in all the documentation and done all the work to get that special circumstance done or the dependency override, if they end up going to SUNY Potsdam instead, they're going to have to go through that same process for SUNY Potsdam. They should also be aware that SUNY Potsdam may have a different process, right, for verifying those special cases and special circumstances. When we talk about special cases and professional judgments, this is where schools are trying to use their discretion. Discretion and determinations are things that are found a lot in the FSA handbook, which is where you can find all the information on special cases. So I actually left the link there in the presentation. Once you grab it, you can have it, or you can click on that link. And it'll take you to the handbook, where it really dives into special cases and what schools can do as professional judgment. They're really trying to use their discretion to modify data and calculate the SAI. So schools cannot just go in and say, you know what, this student's having a rough time, I'm going to change their SAI to a negative. They cannot do that. They cannot just change the whole SAI. What they can do is, based on the documentation and information they receive, they can modify elements of the formula, right? So different parts of the formula to then generate a different SAI, but they cannot just change the SAI in general. And they have to be able to back up every change they make with documentation, right? They'll also use this to resolve conflicts, report cases of fraud, and determine students that may be unaccompanied youth or homeless. Okay, so they're going to use all this information to try and determine if the student warrants a dependency override, or if it warrants a income adjustment. Okay, I got a request for a link, so give me 1 second. Let me see if I can get that out for you. Oh, is that the link for FSA? If it's a link for FSA, it will be in the presentation. All right. Thank you for that, though. And I'll put it in the chat afterwards. All right. So here are some things that might be considered for special circumstances. So with special circumstances, we're talking about income. These are income adjustments for students. These are some of the most common things that you might see high school students with. There's a whole litany of other ones, but I try to focus on what you might see as high school counselors with seniors right now. So death of a parent or spouse, something you might see, something we can adjust for. Divorce or separation of a parent or spouse, or parent or student unemployment, right? So if student had gainful employment, maybe they were working and doing something, and going to school and that, whatever it may be, and they become unemployed, that's something we can adjust for. The parent becomes unemployed as a main breadwinner, or a breadwinner becomes unemployed, we can also, not we, but FAFSA can also make adjustments for that. Other things that might come up that you may not see as often are like medical bills, right? Nursing home expenses that parents might have to incur based on their elderly parents. Childcare expenses for the student, right? The student has a child and has to go into daycare or even elementary or secondary school, right? High school, they may be able to use some funds for that. So they may be able to have an adjustment for that. Other things, the disability, right? So severe disability of the student or other member of the family that is getting income, that might also create a special circumstance, as well as things like other family members in college. Those are all circumstances that may warrant some kind of income adjustment or SAI adjustment. So that is what students can adjust for through FAFSA. Once again, that's a student aid handbook link that I'll send out that has a list of all the things that may incur. And still, those schools do have discretion to add some other things based on what the student's life circumstances are. So the process for an income adjustment or special circumstance to the school is that students need to either contact the college or the college might contact them based on the information given on their FAFSA. Every college has their own procedure. That's something I'm really gonna hit home, right? Every college has their own procedure, so students should really know if you do it at one college, it does not just carry over. You have to do that same work. And the school is not gonna just say, "Hey, just send the stuff over." They're gonna have to go to the school and go through the new school's process. The school asks for whatever documentation they need to verify that special circumstance. So documentation may mean divorce papers. It may be uh, financial documents. It may be an unemployment slip. It may be things like tuition or daycare expenses. Whatever the case may be, there's going to be documentation required. Schools can also use things like documented phone calls, documented interviews, things like that that may not be on paper, but they can record that they can use for income adjustments and for verification. Now, if the student's um, income is going to be adjusted, the financial aid office will adjust their financial aid package and then let the student know what they're getting now. If it's denied, the financial aid package will stay the same. So students do also have the ability to appeal those decisions. Just like every school has their own procedure, every school will have their own appeal process. So if a student wants to appeal, they'll have to go through the school's channels on how to appeal. They cannot appeal a school's decision on an income adjustment to New York State Higher Education Services Corporation. We can't tell the school they should adjust for that. They cannot appeal it to the Department of Education, right? They have to use the school's channels to appeal for that institution. We don't have the power to tell that institution to do that. All right. Now let's change gears from income to independence. You may have seen the screen if you helped a student or if you've completed the FAFSA recently. This is that indication where a student might have an unusual circumstance, a circumstance like having to leave home due to abusive home, having a refugee status, or parents are displaced, victim of human trafficking. Also, the question on is a student homeless or about to be homeless. These are things that we call unusual circumstances that may warrant a dependency override. All right. Obviously, and the school may see this question and reach out to the student for information, or the student may reach out and if it's happened recently and say, "Hey, this is what's going on," and then the school will continue from there. Here are some things that do not qualify for an unusual circumstance. Parents refusing to contribute to the student's education. Parents don't want to provide any information to FAFSA for verification. Uh, those are things that we see often, which is kind of unfortunate, but they're because of the way that the ed law is, those students will only be eligible for those unsubsidized loans. Just like if they went to fill out the FAFSA and the parents declined the invitation, they will only be eligible for the unsubsidized loan. So the same thing carries over here. Even if the parents do not claim the student, that does not mean the student is independent. If the student has a job and rents their own apartment, that does not mean the student is independent. So just the ability to demonstrate self-sufficiency and being able to sustain themselves is not in and of itself independence. They have to be able to tell us that. So in the case of some students that can do that, they can, if they were to lose their job tomorrow and get kicked out, some of the students can still go home and be fired, right? So those students are still dependent. They have a safety net. This is kind of more for students that do not have that safety net, that do not have parents at all, that do not have the ability to contact or receive help or any kind of assistance from their parents at any time. Okay. There's a distinction there. Moving forward, things that may qualify are things like parents are incarcerated. Okay. We already mentioned leaving home due to an abusive environment, human trafficking, abandoned or estranged. You might have some students that have that McKinney veto letter, that letter that designates that they are homeless or at risk of homelessness. That is a document that people that we, even at HESC, use to help determine if a student should be considered independent based on homelessness. Right. So that's all should be there. The process for unusual circumstances is much the same as it is for special circumstances. The student will contact the school, or the school, if it's already indicated on the FAFSA, will contact the student, and then they will have to follow the procedures from that school as for documentation that's needed to verify that special circumstance. Okay. Once that happens, the school will either give the student a dependency override, which ends up just being they override the dependency status and make them independent, or the student is denied that and they have to supply parents' information. So back to the FAFSA, if a student hits unusual circumstances, and that's the only thing that they have for independence, that next screen will show them their dependency status, and you can have dependent, you can have independent, or you can have provisionally independent. Those students that are provisionally independent are going to be pending the school getting this information. If they're provisionally independent and the school denies their independence, they're going to have to go back in and have that contributor fill out that FAFSA form. Once again, if they can't fill that FAFSA form or decline doing so, then the student will just have to be eligible for unsubsidized loans only. Okay. So that's it for FAFSA in general, right? So that's the overview of FAFSA and those special circumstances. Once again, I'll send that link out for special cases that has even some examples. So if you're like struggling to figure out if a student is actually going to be independent or not, they do have some like scenarios that you can go through and see. Oh, okay, I have a student that fits this scenario. This is close enough, and kind of guide your thought process and help guide the student's thought process on how they'll be considered through those channels. Now let's talk about TAP special circumstances. Now for TAP, New York State side, we have two reasons for special circumstances or adjustments. They are income adjustments and financial independence, much the same as FAFSA, but we have different rules for the program. Okay, different rules on our income adjustments, and I'll go through that right now. So let's start with income adjustments because that's the one that we get a lot of. We get a lot of both. But I think this is some of the ones that people struggle with the most is the income adjustments. To kind of frame your thinking, there are a few things that cannot be adjusted that could be adjusted for FAFSA. So one of those things is changes in employment, right? So FAFSA allows for unemployment to be part of that special circumstance. TAP does not allow that. We do not allow change in housing. So what that means is for FAFSA, students have what's called contributors. So it doesn't really matter who the child lives with at the time. What matters is who gives the child more support. For TAP, we have a different consideration. We always use the custodial parent's income if the parents are no longer together, divorced, or separated. So if the custodial parent's income is $125,000, the student cannot just move into the other parent's home and then use that parent's income. The custodial parent will still have that income, right? So we can't just change whose house the student is in and then change the income based on that. We do not allow adjustments for medical expenses, right? So like those nursing home coverages that FAFSA may allow, or dental or medical bills, we do not allow that for TAP, and we do not allow that for dependent care expenses. Okay, and there's a reason for that. Like for us, we're a grant, so we're giving you a grant. For that, they're Pell, so they're able to change the SII or the need, and then they can update the Pell that way. But we can't do that. All right. So what we can adjust for, we have a few reasons we can adjust for: death of a wage earner, so that's a parent or a student or a spouse, parent IRA rollover. So this is something that we can adjust for where parents may have changed jobs over the year. If they've changed jobs over the year and they rolled their 401k over from one company to another or one agency to another, it does sometimes show in the tax return, and we use that in the calculation. We are able to remove that income. So if it's just a rollover, and say they got a $200,000 rollover, we can remove that rollover. That is not the same as an IRA distribution. So if the parents got a distribution of any kind, we will use that. Another thing that happened a lot, especially after COVID, was unemployment compensation. Parents say, "Oh, that's not taxed." Although it's not taxed, it is still used in the income calculation for TAP. So pensions are used unless they're for disability. IRA distributions are used, as well as unemployment compensation of any kind. All those things are disbursements of income that are used to calculate student aid. So if a parent has one of those things, we cannot adjust for that. The same thing with like investments. If they're getting money from investments, or even if they're not touching it, if they're getting interest and money from investments that shows up on the tax return, we will count that as income as well. All right. Another thing we can adjust for is income loss due to permanent or total disability, and then income loss due to parent, spouse divorce, or separation. Now, all of these are on our application. So at different places in our application, we will ask, has there been a death of a parent? Has there been disability? Are your parents divorced, separated, widowed, never married? In all those circumstances, there is a date that's put there on the application. It is really important that the student put the correct date on the application because we use that in our calculation. For TAP, we don't just remove income. What we do is prorate the income. We do remove income in certain circumstances, like the IRA rollover or like permanent disability. But when it comes to things like death of a wage earning parent or divorce and separation, we use the date given on the application and the date verified on the documentation we receive to prorate the income. So the parents were married, say for this year, all of 2023, and then divorced until halfway through 2024. We would count both their incomes until the day they divorced and then prorate the rest of the income to then adjust for that student's income. So we don't just remove it, we prorate it. I'm sure we have questions on that. So write down your questions, throw them in the question and answer panel. If you're new, you came in a little bit later, you can open the question and answer panel by clicking that Q&A panel button right by the share button, or hit the more button with the 3 dots, and the Q&A panel should be there as well. All questions should be put in there, and I'll answer them by the end of the presentation. All right. So income adjustment documents. So when the student either enters that in the application or makes us aware of it, we will send what's called a request for information letter. There's an email that goes out and a physical letter to the home that delineates what exact documents we're going to need. Based on the situation, we're going to need different documents. So for say a separation divorce, we would need the full divorce document. The student needs to send the entire divorce document, not just the first page and the last page. This happens a lot. There's like a 25-page divorce document, and we get the first and last page. We need the whole document. There's information in that document that we use for proration. Things like child support. Things like there's some divorces that have considerations for the divorced parent to pay for college, right, or to give certain monies toward college. So we need the full divorce document. We'll need proof of separate addresses to prove that they actually do live apart. We'll need like things like W-2 forms and 1099s and tax returns. We use that information to figure out exactly whose income was what, because when it comes in, it's just a blanket, let's say $180,000. We use those documents to determine, all right, the student's, this parent that he lived with, they only had 50, and the other parent had 130, right? And then we'll prorate from there. So we need all of those documents so we can understand exactly what the financial situation is and how much money is actually removed from the home, and then make the adjustment. For total permanent disability, we need things like a doctor's letter to say that they are totally and permanently disabled. Things like a social security disability letter to say like they're on disability as of this date, and this is why. Things like that. All right. Death of a wage earning parent, we'll probably take the death certificate of that parent plus that financial documentation so we can see how much to prorate, right? But all those documents will be entered into that request for information letter, and the student will have a hard copy of exactly what documentation they need to send in. For income adjustment, we'll send that request for information letter out. When we send that letter out, the student needs to upload those documents to their HESC account. They can do so a couple of different ways. They can do so just by logging into the HESC account, clicking the details menu, and then going to that upload documents link that's underneath that. Or they can go to their go to the HESC website, hit student account sign in, and then under additional access, they'll see upload documentation. They'll click that link, sign in to be able to upload things that way. We do have a video and a PDF resource document on our FAFSA Ready training page under TAP that will walk students through how to upload a document, or you can print it out and give it to a student if they're having trouble uploading documents. But those resources are available for you to help students do that. When we receive all the documents, that's when we can start processing. So we cannot start processing a divorce if we only have the W-2s, right? We have to have all the information before we start processing. So if a student comes to you and says, "Well, I already uploaded the divorce document, I just have to upload so and so. It shouldn't be that long," they're not going to get started with the process until we receive all the documents that are requested. Processing typically takes 6 to 8 weeks. That's on like a really good, like when we're like really up to date. When it comes to income adjustments, these are the hardest ones to do. We get tens and tens of thousands of these, and they're each manually reviewed and entered into a calculation to create the new income and the new award. So sometimes it's more like 10 to 12 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks. It depends on the time of year, but income adjustments, they should be aware, do take much longer. So they should really get their stuff in as soon as possible so they're in the queue waiting to be processed. Students should periodically check their HESC account for updates to the award, right? So after the award changes, we don't usually send a letter out, but students should just check their awards to see if it's processed or where it is in the process. All right. If a student's approved, then the income will be recalculated and they'll get a new TAP award, or they'll be approved for TAP. If it's denied, the TAP award will remain the same. So that's TAP income adjustments. And then we're going to go to financial independence. So we have some rules for financial independence. So our rules are different than FAFSA, right? FAFSA after 24, student is independent. For us, any applicant that's 22 or younger, so that's all your high school seniors, must be all basic conditions and have a special condition in order to be considered dependent. And even some students that are above 22, if they don't meet the basic conditions, they will not be considered independent until they're 35 or older. That is the age of complete independence, no matter what. So what are those basic conditions? Those are the questions that you'll see where we're asking, does the student reside with the parent for more than 6 weeks? Is a student a tax dependent on the parents of the last 2 tax years? Are we getting parental assistance? Some things to make students aware of. When we say reside with parents, that means, do they live in a building, apartment, or a place owned or leased by their parents for more than 6 weeks? So we have some students that go to, say, NYU, but they're from upstate New York, and they go to NYU and they have an off-campus apartment, but then they come home for the summer. That's not independence. You're still coming home for the summer and for breaks, right? That doesn't constitute independence. Or you have students that, hey, I pay my rent. Oh, where at? Well, in my parents' garage apartment. That doesn't count, right? In my parents' duplex. That doesn't count. It's your parents' duplex. You're paying rent to your parents. That's still a building or apartment owned by your parents. So they should answer yes to that question if that is the situation that they're in. Tax dependence, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. If they're a tax dependent, they were claimed as a dependent. They should answer yes to that. And then parental assistance. Once again, sometimes students forget, and I'm a parent now. Sometimes it is different and difficult, right? Because they'll forget that, oh, my parents pay for my gas. My parents give me money for groceries. My parents are currently paying my phone bill. All right, so all these things are happening, and they forget that that amounts to more than $750. So if that's the case, they should also click yes to those. So there's basic conditions. If they meet those, then they should answer yes, and they be eligible for other things. If not, then they will not be considered independent. Because the special conditions that we have for independence are, each parent is deceased or permanently disabled or declared incompetent by the court, right? So if any of those things happen, the student will be considered independent. You can have more than one of those things too. So like, say one parent is deceased, but then they don't have a relationship with the other parent, they may be able to combine 2 of these, okay? Another reason for independence or special condition is student receives public assistance. So that does not include SNAP, right? So SNAP, that isn't included in that public assistance realm. And they have to have it on their own. So they can't be listed as a dependent on somebody else and receiving these benefits. They have to be receiving it on their own. All right. And then the last one is the applicant is a ward of a court. All right. So if the applicant is a ward of the court, orphan after 13, foster care, or even have a legal guardianship, those are things that are also considered independent students. And another thing with that, just to go back real quick, if a student is ward of the court, um, or legal guardianship, when they answer those basic condition questions, the basic conditions are only with the biological parents or step parents. So if they don't live or aren't receiving assistance from the biological parents or step parents, then that doesn't count, right? So they should understand that. Fill that out only by your biological parents or your step parents. So some information that we'll ask of from students, um, information that you may see is death certificate. So we'll ask for that if the parents are deceased. Near state or near city budget letter. That's a letter that kind of details exactly what kind of public assistance that student is getting. We'll use that to verify that. Legal guardianship documentation. McKinney veto letter. You might be familiar with that. Or proof of total permanent disability, just like with income. All right. For those circumstances like involuntary dissolution of family where they don't fit into one of those nice little boxes and categories with specific documentation, but just like unusual circumstances for FAFSA, they may have had to leave home for whatever reason. If that's the case, right, we might need a notarized third-party letter. Now, this letter cannot be from the student or the student's parents, obviously, or it cannot be from from the college institution. It has to be from a person that is well aware of the situation and that can give details on the situation. It needs to be a notarized letter that is sent to HESC. Now, we don't need, if there's like obviously abuse in the home, we don't need details on the abuse itself, but we would like to have a full picture of why the student does not have any contact or cannot have contact with their parents. In processing some of these over the last few years, sometimes students give the least amount of information possible. I'm sure if you're a teacher in a school, I know my kids' teacher always talks about how when they write, sometimes they don't add enough evidence, but they try to do it quickly and get it over with. We need to have a full picture. So they should put as much information as they can give us that gives us a full picture of their circumstance the first time, so that they're not getting denied and then wondering why and then having to send more information or write another letter. Have them send a full letter the first time so we can review it and make that determination with as much information as possible. So if a student is requesting finance independence, we will send a letter out. Once again, they'll delineate that on their application. We'll send that letter out. They'll upload those documents via the upload link that I mentioned earlier. And then processing for this takes about 6 to 8 weeks. This is not as cumbersome as the income adjustments. So it does happen a little bit quicker. It may happen a little bit faster, but income adjustments definitely take longer. If the student does need to enter parent information, they'll be denied and then have to enter parent information. Or if they're granted independence through the application or afterwards, their income amount will be recalculated based, and their award schedule will be recalculated based on their new financial independence status. Okay. I mentioned uploading documents a lot. So this is the page that I talked about with submitting documents. When HESC gets documents, we love to have them uploaded because they all go to a central place as opposed to like sending them all over the place. The link here will send you to the student account website, which under additional access, you'll see upload documentation. So beneath that, you'll see this is what this site will look like. Make sure the student selects the right program. So if they're applying for 24-25, they should select 24-25. If they're applying for 25-26, which most of your students will be, then they'll be doing 25-26, and then the document type. So it could be an income questionnaire. So an income questionnaire is select like income adjustments, financial independence status. Those have specific places they should enter into, and then browse and select the document and upload it. Right. So that's the upload process for students and what they'll see and have to do to get that special circumstance. So I'll open up the questions that you may have. If you have any additional questions, you can throw them in the Q&A panel. So there's a question in here. If I understand it right, this is on the school level. So if it's done on the school level, once again, we don't have any jurisdiction over what the school does. So that seems like a school-oriented question with transferring credits. Like one of the other thing we don't have any control is credits and what credits transfer and what credits don't. Same thing with Excelsior. Some students that have Excelsior and then they transfer colleges and accept all the credits, so they are under 30. Unfortunately, we don't have any jurisdiction on how schools can look at credits. Are there any other questions with special circumstances? I'll try to get through this presentation as quickly as possible so that you guys can answer any question that you guys might have. All right, there are no other additional questions. Thank you for your time today. It's been awesome. Thank you for your attention. Please fill out that survey. The survey will be really helpful to know how we can make this presentation better for future classes. We appreciate your attention today. And if you don't have any other questions, you can log off. If you have more questions, feel free to stay on and ask your questions.